welcome to the Stretch to Go podcast. My name is Ian Ray, your host today, and I have a special guest, Halinka Hart from Flow Motion Fitness. You might have seen her on her Instagram, where she's promoting mobility, and she's located online, of course, and she's a nomad in Europe, traveling with Callum. Some of the services that she offers are online coaching, joint assessment, her CPD Mobility Certification, and big proponent of barefoot strength, and of course working with spatial mobility. So Halinka, welcome to the Stretch to Go podcast.
Hey, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, so right off the bat, what are some of the most common misconceptions about gaining mobility or even working on mobility that you have to overcome with clients?
So definitely the one that I hear most in consultations, and even just online in conversations, is that people have been doing mobility training, it's not working for them. And when I ask them what they've been doing, we find out that it's been dynamic stretching or a few very limited dynamic stretches that, of course, do not encompass mobility training. And they are basically just like 5% or the warm up of what you would start before you do the real mobility training. So it's kind of overcoming the misconception of what mobility training actually is. And I think a lot of that could be because of the visuals of it on social media. So things that you see on your Discover page will be dynamic stretches, or things that go super viral are often things that are promising great results from just one dynamic stretch, which is highly unrealistic, and it confuses people. And I think what happens is they go, oh, well, I've tried it and it doesn't work, so something's wrong with me, rather than necessarily thinking, sorry about that beeping, necessarily thinking about, well, actually, maybe it's not my fault. I've maybe not done anything wrong. Maybe I've just done a few exercises that aren't really going to do too much.
And to tell the audience, what's your backstory? How did you get involved in this type of work? What's your background?
Yeah, I haven't spoken about it much recently because I'm worried. Like, it's just once I start talking about it, all people want to talk about is my back injury. But I discovered this because, well, I wasn't a responsible human being and went, you know what, I'm going to think about this ahead of time. I had a car accident and I had no choice but to think about it. I was basically in a car accident where I had 3 herniated discs, 2 different separate locations on my body. I had nerve damage and quite a lot of muscle atrophy on one side of my body. And the physiotherapist and the back specialist told me that I'm not going to get much better. And what I didn't understand so much is that directly after the accident, I didn't feel too bad. It was within 5 hours that the inability to move set in, which I found very confusing. I thought, if something's literally like broken for good, how come it came on so slowly after the impact? And I didn't really understand what they meant by, oh, well, this is going to get worse as you get older. At the time, I was a skier and I was hoping to go back into FIS training and competitions. And I just didn't really get it around in my head that it's possible that that would be taken away from me, or that this injury would last quite as long as it did. But the truth is, I wasn't getting enough help at all. So when I was going to specialists and going to my physio appointments, the therapy that I was getting was just not enough for me. And I'd say for anyone that's an athlete, what they were giving me was far too little as well. And their benchmark for me improving was far too low as well. And eventually it got to the point of, because I was already a coach working in a gym at the time, my colleagues who had much more experience than me at the time, they gave me a bunch of different courses, books, and directions to research, and helped me essentially quite a lot with my injury. And what I found out was actually what I was being told at the doctors and the physios wasn't entirely true. And it took about a year. I don't know exactly the timeline, but perhaps a year and a bit, when I found a back specialist that didn't tell me no. So usually I'd go in and I'd say, am I allowed to try this? Am I allowed to try that? They'd say no, I would be terrified of it. But eventually I started kind of getting tired of being in pain and getting worse. So I started trying things. And my last back specialist was like, well, whatever you've done has ever so slightly increased the muscle mass that you've lost. And the feeling as well, because they were checking how much feeling I was having quite regularly. And of course, the pain markers, like I could tell they were going down. He was like, off the record, you can do this, even though it was at the time, really, I shouldn't be doing it. So that's what made me really like, okay, there's something else.
Okay. So with that, did that kind of drive a passion for you of like, that you can actually find ways besides going to a physical therapist and overcoming these type of chronic or like acute injuries?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of just got me obsessed. Kind of started forgetting about my ski career and started getting obsessed with movement and what other kind of things I could learn and what else I could do. And I followed the same methodologies. I call it mobility training, but it's really mobility and strength training. Like it's all encompassing, which is why we have a second certification, actually, the CPD Mobility and Strength Certification, because we talk about how to blend the two methodologies, especially when you've got like limited range of motion to kind of bridge the gap. And I suppose that's what I was doing. I was just trying to bridge the gap of the motion I'd lost and the range of motion in my joints that I'd lost. And just by following that methodology and that sequencing that I had found that worked so well, I started developing skills as well by mistake. And I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. So yeah, that's pretty much the story. I mean, I just didn't stop exploring. I'm still like constantly looking for new things and books, and it's fun.
Yeah. So I guess who has kind of shaped your influence into like, getting into this type of mobility work? Like what kind of research have you done or books or, learning?
I took a few courses. So I did a mobility certification in London, which I really did like because it was quite holistic. It did speak about breathing, about joint function, joint testing, and then it was also calisthenics based. So I really did like that. We did FRC and we've done a huge amount of research since because we wanted to make our own certification with the different courses and certifications and books that we'd read at that point.
Mhm.
But obviously, since then, we've done a lot more. And what I was really interested in is seeing if the scientific literature out there could actually prove some of what I was seeing in real life. And at the time when I started doing the first mobility certification, there was not that much out there. And by the time we were doing the strength and mobility certification, there was just hundreds of papers where people are actually testing these methods. And it's like, this is becoming more normal, I'd say, to test. So you could literally go on and go on Google Scholar and type in a the hard part is because I was a researcher as well, actually, before this. I should mention that I was a researcher for an academic researcher. So I knew how to like research papers and research topics and basically lose myself for days finding things. And I suppose that's what I've done over the last decade is I've just like asked a question and kept looking and asking in different combinations to see if someone's been studying it, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. Yeah, you're trying to find an answer a question that's not been solved. And so you with your research background, look, like I said, they're looking at different angles and different places to find that. So that makes sense.
Yeah. Sometimes it's about how you word a question or how it will come up in a paper that doesn't sound so relevant. And I suppose that's where I've been finding a lot of information that, yeah, has kind of over the last, I'd say 5 years, has started really shifting towards being more open to new techniques. There's so much more in there now, like so much more advanced techniques that they're testing, which is really nice.
Cool. And then I guess how did you get into online coaching? I know that's what you're currently doing, being a nomad.
Yeah, well, I mean, we were coaching in London. So it's, first of all, I don't know if in the US they do this, but in London you have to pay the gym in order to coach there. So it sucks for everyone living in the UK and coaching. Basically, you're paying the same as you would on rent to the gym just to work there. And they don't provide you with clients. So you're basically just like working a lot to cover those fees of being allowed to coach in a gym.
Yeah.
So after like 5, 6 years of doing that, I was like, okay, I need to start coaching people outside of the gym and, in parks and stuff or in private gyms and private homes because this is stupid. It's crazy. And we were paying so much money just to coach. So we started doing that as well.
Uh-huh.
I was like, this is fine, but now I'm fully booked and I don't have time. And my clients still need me, but I think I should be focusing more on their movement quality rather than just telling them the same thing over and over again, if that makes sense. I don't think it was a valuable use of their money or my time.
Mhm.
So I thought of something called hybrid coaching, and I found the True Coach app, which was amazing. And basically, it meant that I could film my stuff and give them tutorials and explain what it is I really wanted them to know in that video. So I didn't have to waste my time saying it 8 times a day. And then when I saw them, I would see them instead of for like an hour, 2, 3 times a week, I'd see them for an hour and a half, 1 to 2 times a month. So I would have like a really long session with them where we really focus on technique, focus on the things they're struggling with. And
Mhm.
then the rest of the time they would be online and I'd be able to see their videos, which is something I'd do anyway in person because I don't know how you think about it, Ian, but like when you see somebody move, the human eye is just like not that quick. So I would always film it and then pause it and then like move back forwards and back to catch what they're doing better. And I found it was actually more effective because, first of all, I could help them more. But second of all, it was them getting much more of my time for much less money. And it just felt more sustainable that way. And because I'd already been doing that for about a year, I was like, I'm going to try doing just this and travel a little bit. And that's how that started.
It's crazy. Who is your typical demographic and population that you work with? That who are like what type of people? Yeah, what's their background? Like why are they coming to you? Like with their issues and
Yeah. When I was working in the gym, after a few years, because I was going through this journey of my own, I got really interested in mobility training early on, so quite a long time ago. And a few of my clients, they were ballet dancers for the Royal Ballet School, they were rugby players for the London Irish. They're like people who were quite high up in their athletic careers, but they were getting injuries. So I would start using the things that I learnt to test them, to help them do some mobility training, and to help them with their injuries. Um, One guy came to me because he'd had an accident and he needed a knee operation. He tore his meniscus, and we'd done some rehab for 2 months. And I used all the techniques that I learned about, and I tried everything with him. He was like, "Give me everything, I'll do everything." So I was very lucky that I got an athlete that was that hardworking. And the day he was going into his operation, they scanned his knee, and like his meniscus had grown back enough to not need to operate on it. I was like, okay, like maybe I should just do more of this. Actually, this is kind of handy. So I started saying like I'm not going to do weight loss coaching anymore. I'm not interested in that. I'm going to just help people with pain and so I ended up just getting referrals from everywhere. I'd get like tennis players, lots of rugby players, lots of ballet dancers, people that were professionals in this field, bikers. And yeah, I just focused on their pain points and their mobility restrictions. And yeah, it was really good. It was really nice, yeah, seeing people like firsthand get better. I even had a few clients who were older who had never trained and they could barely walk. And I was like, I don't know if I could do that. That's out of my league. But they were like, please, can you do something? No one else will help. So I did. And then within a year, the guy was squatting. I was like, okay, these methods work for everyone. So obviously, like they have to be very regressed for the older population. But there was the same methodologies, the same methodologies. And even though I was getting a huge amount of athletes, I was also getting older people. And it was just very satisfying to be able to help both types of people.
yeah. I can agree. That's the two types of population I typically work with, the geriatrics and the active professionals. I'm doing what I do as a fascia stretch therapist. So I feel like you could probably relate to is like there's a population, especially the older population, where they kind of get neglected because they either go to assisted living home or a nursing home, and like who's working with them, and a lot of the times, I mean, it could fall like injury prevention for them would be like falls. Could that be
Hmm.
prevented? Possibly, if they learn how to, I guess, be mobile on their feet, but also like with balance. So like, I know you and I are both proponents of barefoot strength. We
Hmm.
use spacer mobility as our tool. So with our toe spacers, we have a roller. But how do you see these type of things as far as like this knowledge of barefoot mobility and strength? How important is that for, let's say, anyone, whether if you're active or even if you're an older population?
Yeah, extremely. Like even before I knew about any kind of toe spaces and before the toe spaces were a thing,
Uh-huh.
back when I was coaching, then I would get people to take their shoes off if I could, if I was allowed to at the place I was. And when we managed to do some training outside one summer with our clients, we were taking their shoes off and they were training on the grass barefoot. And we saw the fastest results then. And I was like, is this a coincidence that like they're not wearing shoes, they're on grass, they're on different terrain, and they're improving faster?
Mhm.
And I was curious since then, obviously. I always wanted them to do footwork, toe work, balance work, and basically do the majority of their session if they could in a private space without their shoes on. And first of all, they were loving it. They were definitely reporting that they could feel more. I used to start all my sessions with rolling their feet on a peanut ball.
Yeah.
Like, just we were chatting and seeing how each other's days were, and, you always chat when you see your client first thing, and I was like, "Oh, we're gonna waste 4 minutes here anyway, just roll your feet." And it just seeing how we were doing, um, while we were chatting away, and they definitely felt more in their lower legs. I was doing it especially with like the older population that was struggling with balance and walking. There was a lot of rolling work with their feet and their lower legs, and it definitely released things for them to be able to then feel things better. Like proprioception was just a lot better for them after that.
Yeah. So how did you get involved with spacer mobility? I know they're based in Canada. They have a lot of great
Yeah.
products that you can use. What got you interested in working with them?
Well, they reached out over lockdown to see if we wanted to try their toe spaces, and I was like, "Nah, I'm okay, thanks." I just didn't think it was something that would work. And then they reached out again a little while later. I was like, "Ah, okay, let's try it. Let's try it. Okay." I put them on, and I was like, "Cool, they're fun. I don't see the big deal." But then before I knew it, I was like training outside a lot, and I was like, I wonder what would happen if I trained in these. So I just wore them through my sessions. Obviously, I worked my way up into that because when I first put them on, I was like, "Ooh, that's quite a stretch." But after a few weeks, it was fine. And I just started sort of experimenting with stuff. And suddenly I was feeling my lower legs kick in squats in a way I'd
Mhm.
never felt. And I was like, hmm, that's weird. And then I just was like, okay, what else I could do? So I started training in them all the time, and I unlocked so much balance and new skills that I'm pretty sure were because my feet were being stretched and I was working my feet as they were being stretched. So that sparked that interest in me, and that's when I was like, no, this is a real deal. This is actually a great tool to
Yeah,
use when you're training. So
definitely.
that's how that happened. But basically, it happened over a bit of time because I didn't really believe it at first. I just by chance tried it because I was locked in my house anyway.
Yeah, I think this is, I mean, so I've been using toe spacers for about 6 months, but before that, I kind of gone to the barefoot shoes. I switched over to barefoot shoes last year. And for me, I noticed more of that. My foot is hella weak. I grew up in Hawaii, so I grew up bare feet a lot, but I didn't know that there were muscles in these, these nerve endings, sensors that actually played a big role in athletic and even daily things. And I wish that I learned about this earlier in my athletic life in high school and college because I think I would have avoided a lot more injuries, possibly, knowing that, everything's your foundation starts from the ground up. And so that's something that I kind of course, tell my clients is like, let's look from their feet up because if you have weak feet, it's going to go up the kinetic chain into your knees, to your hip. And that's another thing I want to kind of look into with you is as far as like with fascia. So you in your CPD mobility, you mentioned that you kind of briefly go over fascia.
Mhm.
How do you think fascia plays a role in mobility?
Well, I think it's very obvious when you're injured because your body's so in pain and sensitive that certain motions just become locked to you. You just don't have them anymore. Like I couldn't lean forward over a sink. I couldn't sit myself up for years. It was just agony. But when you're moving around with that level of pain, you feel those lines, sort of thing. You're like, I can't twist that way. Like, or when you do actually do the stretch, you feel it all the way down and all the way wrapped around, and you're like, it's pretty obvious when you're in pain, basically. But obviously, like, there's no, people get confused. They look at them and they think that there's actual physical lines, and it's like, it's not not like that. We just have so many different ways in which our bodies can stiffen up and connect and get aggravated. And I suppose it really seems obvious when you have several clients that are experiencing several issues here, here, and here, and you're like, oh, that's strange. You have 5 different issues, but it's like, well, it's not really different. They're kind of connected.
Yeah.
And it's quite often things will happen where someone has an issue with his scapula and then that hip is an issue and it's like it crisscrosses around the body. And people are like, well, then why is it on the different side? It's like, well, there are a few things to explain that. And I like how that model is a great thing for coaches to kind of look at and see what they should be potentially assessing and looking into with their clients. I feel like it's a nice way to just check all the boxes and check if that could be an issue.
Do you find with fascia, in your probably knowledge of fascia, how important it is in athletic performance?
Generally,
You know,
well, yeah, I mean, I suppose there's a lot of emphasis on rotational work in that sense, because not just of the joints, but also of the entire body as a whole, as a multi-joint system. And when you do athletic sports, you are using your entire body in unusual ways quite often, sometimes in limited ways and repetitive ways. But it's really important to, when you're an athlete, look at things not from the zoomed in perspective, but from the far away perspective. And I think at least that methodology is really handy and a very, very good visual for people to see in their minds what it is that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, so I'm learning through anatomy trains of the fascial lines. And yeah, I think if everyone, especially athletic trainer and personal trainers, were to include that into their assessment or even their work, who knows? It could probably unlock a lot of people's issues, and as far as like in their scope of work, how it can help them in their training too. So
Yeah.
kind of help me to understand how did this CPD Mobility Certification come about? And what is CPD for people who don't know?
CPD is basically an international certification. It's kind of like SIMSA, or you can have different awarding bodies that basically certify your course. But
Mhm.
we picked this one because it's international and because it's based in the UK. So we were in the same time zone to do things. But yeah, we chose that because it's something that people can do online, and then they can use those points, because there's 4 CPD points in each of our courses, and then they can switch them to their awarding body. So say they have a SIMSA awarding body or a REPS awarding body, they can switch those points over in any country they are.
Okay.
So that's what that is. And how it came about, well, I started writing a book about all this stuff. And I was like, kind of wish I could mix medias in this. Like, the book's nice, but I wish I could like put in videos and checklists and teach people how to actually use it in practical settings, because I'd been to so many different courses in London
Hmm.
and I love them all. And some of them are very practical and some of them very theoretical. But one thing that, after the course is finished on the weekend and, you chat with all the other coaches, quite often they'd be like, I love it, but I don't know what to do with it. And I understood that feeling was coming up over and over again. So I was like, I wonder if, because first of all, I have all these different methodologies that I love. Like, I'm not obsessed with any one of them. I know sometimes people will go on a course and they'll just become that, only that, and they will love it, and it will just be that system that they use. But I love all the systems. I think they all have a place and they all can be relevant to a client. And some of them, sometimes they're not relevant. Sometimes certain methods aren't as good for certain types of tissue types or certain types of injuries or pains or whatever. But the point is, we're all very, very different, and all these methodologies are different, and they have a different time and place in people's recovery process. So basically, I wanted one place for all the things inside my head. So originally I was like, that's going to be a book. And then I started writing the book, and then I was like, yeah, okay, this needs to be much more than that. And that's when we started building out this course. And it took about 2 years, I think, something like that. Me and Callum just dedicated a huge amount of time to every single day working on this course and doing research for this course, because we had these like ideas as well, and we just needed to fact check them. And sometimes one idea would take us several weeks to research to make sure that that's actually the right, or sometimes you go down a rabbit hole and be like, that's actually wrong, and then you'd find the answer. So anyway, the point is, it took us a long time to put it together, and then we finally launched it, and we made it in a way that we wanted it to be practical and helpful to coaches, where they could learn these methods, they can learn these assessments, they can learn these functions and methodologies, but then we also take them through a practical example and through case studies where they can basically figure out how to use it themselves. So yeah, basically that's how it works. On the first mobility certification, the second one's different. And every year we update it because we wanted also something that as new science comes out and new things come out, we want to be able to add to it. And obviously with a book, that would be very complicated. But this course allows us to keep the information flowing and keep the conversation happening as well with the students. And yeah, it basically means that all these methodologies can, instead of us helping just our clients, there's loads of coaches that could be helping their clients. It's like a ripple effect. So yeah, that was kind of the idea originally.
So to kind of summarize, who is the CPD Mobility Certification towards? Like, who could benefit from it?
Definitely coaches. Yoga teachers have done it. CrossFit coaches have done it. Massage therapists. Even we've had some physios do it because they want to know some different out of the box methods to use with their clients, especially when it comes to blending mobility and strength. But we've also had people who aren't coaches do it just because they want to know how to do it themselves. And I've had some of my clients who have been very movement focused and very, they love moving, they love training. They're not coaches, they're just professionals, but they just love it. And so some of them have done it so that they can better help themselves in the long run. And that was kind of the idea of putting it all together, is so that, yeah, it's for coaches, but it's also got a foundation module, which is the first module to help people be on the same page and understand how the joints function. And the idea is, say you're with a coach who's helping you with all this stuff, but then, you can't necessarily afford to do it all the time. You want to know how to address and identify problems in your own body that are propping up and be able to deal with them on your own. That's kind of the idea of it, is so, there's something that they can use information wise to address anything that will pop up in the future, so they don't always have to have a coach forever to help them with these things.
I love that. I love that this is a certification and like a knowledge base based off of your experience, so that people like general public could, like I said, benefit from it. Because I couldn't imagine if mobility is such a big issue in the aging population, but even in athletes with injuries, like repetitive injuries, if they learn this type of things, I mean, how could that benefit them? That could potentially help their career with athletics, or even prevent, like I said, a lot of these falls or major, surgeries that they could probably avoid.
Yeah. When I was getting help with my injuries, and even before that, when I was a skier,
Mm-hmm.
no one tested. Like, no one tested me in that intense way. I had very limited tests, and they were all very focused on the area that was hurting rather than my whole body and how every single joint was interacting. It made me realize, like, if I didn't get this help as an athlete, and I didn't get this help as someone who was very injured, then probably other people aren't. And whenever I work with a client and I find out what tests they've had done so far, it's very minimal, and I realize a lot more can be done in that realm.
Sure. What are some, so kind of switching gears, so I'm going to go back into foot mobility and toe spaces, because I don't know, there's a whole podcast I could talk about this, because I think it's probably not a lot of people understand the importance of, like, the foundation of the foot. But if you could, let's say, give three things that are very important, 3 or 5 things that you think most people should understand about the foot and the importance of how it plays in active daily living, what are some things that you would tell people to work on?
Well, don't underestimate the power of your big toe.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird thing to say, but a lot of balance, a lot of work goes through that. So you've got extension and abduction that you can look into. That's the first thing, is look at your big toe. If you have foot pain, don't underestimate the power of exercises and spacing your feet, spacing your toes. So there's that. Explosive strength, that can be trained eventually. And then footwear. It's not that barefoot shoes are for everybody, and I wouldn't say, oh, everyone should just change to barefoot shoes just immediately and then that's that. There's a process to that. A lot of people will experience discomfort or pain actually transitioning into barefoot shoes because they're doing it too quickly based on what their feet need. So there's also that. So don't be discouraged, essentially, if you've tried barefoot shoes and barefoot living and it's uncomfortable for you. Probably more needs looked at, and it needs to be more of a transition period. But also, as crazy as this sounds, like, don't underestimate the power of training your feet. As weird as that sounds, there's a huge amount you can do to strengthen the function of your feet and your toes, and that will work its way up into your athletic abilities and reduction of pain. And although it sounds strange, it can be very satisfying to do, even though it's odd, and it doesn't need to take a huge amount of time. And it can be added into your training session to actually better the training session. And I do have a lot to say about this. I don't know how to just cut it down to a few things. But basically, don't underestimate the training of your feet is the general gist.
I remember the early days when I was switching into and learning more about the feet strength and working on my foot mobility. I didn't know how weak it was as far as like my range of motion was horrible because of the many sprains and strains I've had on my ankle. I'm sure just scar tissue that I have to work through. But even that lateral aspect of my ankle, that's where I think I've had a lot of my injuries. Luckily, no injuries because it was my ankle immobility. I think that's where I start to get my knee pain a lot, and even some more of my tightness in my hips. And so I didn't see that correlated when I took off my shoes, and it did take it took me a while. I mean, my foot is probably stronger, but I'm sure there's a lot more work I could do so that if I was to continue on this journey, who knows what my foot strength could be. One thing I do want to show people is I love using this. It's the pebble pad. This is especially the first thing in the morning. I think I tend to use that to wake up my senses and myself because I know that's one thing that's missing in my thing is just the sensory part. And you could probably attest to as far as like we put our feet into the shoes whether if it's super padded, and so we lose that senses, right? The sensory part of their feet. And then of course, I mean, our hands have so much sensory part. We work on our hands a lot, but not on our feet. And that's, I think, one of the crucial missing part of people is like, if they were to work on that, they would probably be not to get, tendinopathy or neuropathy, who knows? Those could be avoided and they could probably help them get out of it slowly. So I think that one thing that's helped me a lot is just getting my sensory in my foot back again, just stepping on it, even if it's like uneven surfaces.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a massive thing that people would benefit from, especially people that live in cities that don't get too many opportunities to put their feet on the ground outside or walk on uneven terrain. If you're always walking on perfectly flat terrain, then your ankle's not getting that stimulation and your feet aren't feeling different materials, and it can get to the point where, like when you go to the beach in the summer and people are just like on a pebbled beach, they're like hobbling around like, this is so painful, and I just like walk past them like, what are you even? But I'm kidding, because it's like, I know back before I actually trained my feet I couldn't do it either, but now I'm like, it's my magic trick. But it is nice when you finally don't have pain walking on pebbles. It's great.
So as far as the future for Flow Motion Fitness, what are some of your goals for your business in the future? What do you hope to do and accomplish?
Yeah, well, this year we're finishing another 2 CPD certifications, so we're going to have 4 in total, which I'm excited about because we've been working on them quite some time, and I think they're going to be very, very, very helpful for people. And I want to write a book again, but instead of doing it kind of like for coaches, I want it to be more for everybody and more understandable, and kind of like dial it down a notch with the intensity so it could be much more of a pleasant read and more visual. So yeah, basically I want to do that. I have started it, but because we have so many projects running, it's like hopefully I can get started on it at the end of this year, and that's basically where we're heading to next with this stuff. So continuing with our CPD certifications, and our team is really, really great. We've just got a small team, but everyone in it is really passionate about this. And it allows us to not only online coach, but also develop our programs on the app, and also help all the students on the CPD certification. So we're really excited about the fact that we're sort of plodding along with that aspect and increasing the amount of certifications that we're offering. But it's been a long dream to sort of get back to that book. So yeah, if I can manage that this year, that'll be great. That's the goal.
That'd be awesome. Definitely will be buying your book so I can learn more. As far as like how do you see mobility and its importance? Like, how do you see that in the future? Like, do you think a lot more coaches, a lot more personal trainers, athletic trainers will see the importance of mobility in athletic training or like athletic performance? Do you think that's going to be something that's in the future, or is it currently happening now? I don't know as far as like.
It is happening now, but what I am a little worried about is that the word mobility training is kind of being used with pretty much just like one kind of methodology rather than encompassing of all the different methodologies, including strength training, that it should be blended with long term. So this does risk people kind of like ruining the name of it. I do see people online kind of using mobility training or mobility coach and doing things that are just a little bit incorrect, or I've seen people online make words up and it's not like the scientific definition, or it doesn't actually, I know what they're trying to say. They're trying to talk about tissue type or hypermobility versus hypomobility, which is a thing. And you do need to those tissue types differently, but they're making up different words in their big accounts, and I'm like, okay, that risks the whole thing imploding on itself and being called this like fake thing. It isn't. It's just when people are kind of making things up along the way without necessarily backing it up with scientific explanations. I know not everything has to be scientific because science is a little bit behind sometimes with some of the methodologies used out there. But when we're starting to redefine things, I think one of the things that like kind of I love FRC methodologies, by the way. I think they're fantastic. But one thing that kind of was a bit of an issue is that no one's really addressing the fact that they're saying that mobility is active and flexibility is passive, which is like seriously confusing the subject and meaning that people are seeing it in a way that it just isn't.
Mhm.
So my worry, I suppose, is that mobility training could be seen as something that it's not, rather than mobility training is simply just training in any methodology that you need to in order to increase the mobility of a joint or a set of joints, to increase your mobility, your ability to move. And that can include many different methodologies. And I think by trying to define flexibility training and mobility training and not realizing that they do cross over quite often, we're kind of like, I just don't want it to turn into a cult, basically. I just want it to be like, mobility training is something that everyone can use in different ways for different types of people. And it's not just one thing. It's not just like one narrow thing. There's a lot to it, essentially.
Yeah, just like how I guess for me when I try to explain fascia is like fascia is interconnected with the muscular and the skeletal system, and same thing with mobility. Mobility, like you're saying, encompasses a different type with the strength conditioning, the flexibility. So I totally understand that. That makes sense to me, and so I'll have to change my wording on that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I just hope it won't go to a place where it is seen as a sort of cult thing, rather than, I think people are taking it seriously now, but everything that goes huge on social media risks it being slightly tarnished.
And then my last question for you is, what marketing strategies has worked in growing your business? So like from the inception of Flow Motion Fitness, what has worked for you into growing, your business into what it is now?
I suppose just sharing methodologies, sharing information. One thing I like to do is give away like an explainer guide so that so I have an opportunity to explain what mobility training really is, because I do feel like it gets confused online.
Mhm.
I offer a masterclass that's also like a short masterclass for free. It's literally just giving people tips on how to use mobility training and what not to do as well, not to hurt themselves, because there's also ways you can hurt yourself with mobility training. So I'm a big fan of giving away what you really believe in a short, digestible way for people to understand. But ultimately on social media, like things that will do well, you can't basically always know how someone's going to interpret what you're saying. So sometimes you've got a very small window on the internet to explain your point. Like, you've got not a lot of attention span time. So when you explain something, say it does go viral, usually like 10% of people are going to get the wrong end of the stick. So that's where I really am a big advocate for giving away some free information that's longer, that people that really want to find the truth or really want to find out what you're talking about will actually, they'll go and read it. And so they'll all read it and watch it. And then, yeah, I'd say that's helpful, so that anything that you're doing, you can help your audience understand it better.
Cool. So basically, since you're online, social media has kind of helped you as far as expanding, growing business. And that.
Yeah, for sure. We've posted for a long time, I think, many, many years. And it's always so strange what actually goes viral. But you just keep showing up and sharing random stuff and see what happens.
Well, awesome. Well, I appreciate you for hopping onto this podcast. I learned a lot about you, of course, your business, what you're doing, and your passion. I think it's important for everyone to understand this because it's practical things that people could apply and to work on, and it can help them with their goals, whether it's fitness or just active daily living things. So, thank you so much for hopping on, Halinka.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and do want to have you kind of let people know how they can follow you and learn more about what you're doing. So if you don't mind sharing your website, your social media handle, a way to reach out to you, to do collabs or have questions, and of course finding out the CPD Mobility Certification. So feel free to go ahead and share that with the audience.
Sure, yeah. So you can find everything on flowmotionfitness.co.uk, my website, and you can find me at Halinka Hart on Instagram and Flow Motion Fitness UK on YouTube. And yeah, there's a contact form on my website, on the coaching page, and also on the contact footer page. I think that's everything. Yeah.
Cool, awesome. And for those of you who are listening, don't forget to subscribe and follow the Stretch Studio podcast. We release new podcasts at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much once again. Appreciate you for hopping on.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Bye.